Hey folks, David Stewart here. There was actually music supposed to be going that whole time. I forgot to turn it on my mixer. Okay. Doesn't matter. We'll roll with it. Hope you guys are having a fabulous new year. Welcome to the Writestream. We're going to talk about character archetypes today, which should be fun. And I'll explain what I mean by those and how I think people miss the point with them. I've been talking about them at this point for years. I've done a lot of videos on them. But I think a lot of people miss the boat in thinking that they are supposed to just use them. They think prescriptively about them rather than looking at them as an abstraction of things that people have done. They look at it as something that they ought to do. So I'll dig into that a little bit and we'll talk about character archetypes. Second half, I plan on continuing the live write. So I think one of my goals for the first half here of 2024 is to further show how the sausage is made, I guess, when it comes to books. That is to say, like, I want to show how the process is, not just publishing, because I have a lot of stuff on how to publish books, how to design covers and things like that, but like how to, what does it look like for somebody who's been doing it a while to sit down and write the prose and write the dialogue and construct the actual book? What is that phase two? There's 4 phases, planning. So we did that live, planning, the drafting phase, any kind of revisions or things like that, editing. That's phase 3. And then phase 4 would be publication. So we'll go through each of those. Phase 3, you'll find, may actually have a lot less to it than you think, because if you do a really good job with the phase 1, the planning part, there's just less you have to fix after you finish your first draft. The idea that the first draft that you write is going to be bad, that's just that's kind of a psychological trick that writers do to make themselves feel better about not being good at what they do yet. You just need more practice. And it's okay to write a bad first draft and edit it. Everybody does it differently. Some people just write dialogue for their first draft. There's all kinds of different ways that people find to be creative with their drafting process. But I tend to write a book beginning to end, and I have it planned out what I'm going to do in the book, and then I'll go back and fix things. Usually they're going to be more minor things versus like major changes. Whenever I have to make a major change, it always kind of like takes a long time because it's kind of like pulling threads. Like you pull a thread and like the whole thing starts to fall apart. So it's better to do your outlining beforehand versus doing it afterward. That's my general advice for most writers. And you can take that advice to the bank, because the best writers that I've known tend to do that. You could do, you have to do what excites you. You could be a pants writer like Stephen King or, George R.R. Martin, but you can end up in a place where your endings end up bad. A lot of Stephen King books and stories end up with just kind of a disappointing ending because he doesn't plan it out very much. Or you could end up in a place, like for instance with, George R.R. Martin, where people are waiting for years for another book to come out, and it's probably because you're just getting stalled out on the draft, right? You're getting stalled out on what you're doing in the drafting phase. So anyway, hello. New Year's going well so far? Yes, it is. Okay, so let's hop right into it. Oh, other stuff that we can talk about. Steamboat Willie, the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, is in the public domain. We can talk a little bit about what that means, because a lot of people don't quite understand how copyright works, or why you probably still wouldn't want to use Mickey Mouse as a character, or in what ways you could get away, and what ways you could risk being sued if you were to still use Mickey Mouse. Anyway, character archetypes. An archetype is just like a typical use of a thing. So when we talk about character archetypes, we're talking about typical frames for a character. Characters that act, look, function in a typical way, meaning you can see them in lots of different stories. Lots of different stories will have the same kind of character archetypes. And so the first one that I really want to start with is one of the easiest ones to understand, and that is the everyman. The everyman is a character that is intended to just be like a normal person. Versus a competent man. This is a person who's normal. They're average in their capabilities. They're average in their intelligence and their looks. By average, I just mean like typical or in the middle with those things. And this has a good effect on the readers because readers are often looking for a character with whom they can identify themselves, meaning a character that they understand. And the everyman, being sort of a blank slate, is easy for people to understand and to root for. He's not a person who has extreme unlikable characteristics and not a person who would have extreme likable characteristics. The example that I tend to use is Harry Potter. But you could also use, say, Luke Skywalker to a certain extent, right? Even though he's like this chosen one, where he starts is an everyman. He's not especially funny. He's not especially good looking. He's not especially talented. He's moderately talented, moderately good looking, moderately in all the areas. And then he gets transformed into a hero. And so that's another kind of archetype itself, which is the I don't know what to call it, like the boy King Arthur. But anyway, we'll talk about the everyman. Harry Potter is a really good example. And it's a great example because of the way it functions in the story as well as just how the character is. Every story needs a different kind of character to function well. So if we think about, there's people who've accused Harry Potter of being a Mary Sue, which is nonsense because you can make a list of the things that Harry Potter is good at. On one hand, having had a grenade explode in your hand, right? He's only good at Quidditch. That's the only talent he finds in the wizarding world that he seems like naturally acclimated to, is being a fast rider on a broom. All right, he's a good Quidditch player with this made up sport. And even that is part of the overall function of how Harry Potter works in the story. You have to think Harry Potter starts the story living under the stairs. He lives in a cupboard. He's an abused child. He's scruffy looking. His pants don't fit. All that kind of stuff, right? So what happens? Well, he goes to a magical school where he's able to do magic. Is he good at magic? No, not compared to other wizards. He's very much a fish out of water. So for the fish out of water element to function, he has to not understand everything. And he's only good at Quidditch, which is a wizard sport. So he's not naturally athletic in the way that we would think about it, right? He's not naturally muscular or fast or gifted or anything like that. He's just a normal kid for all of those things. So yeah, that's the only thing he's good at. Everything else he has to work for. He's not stupid, right? He's not at the bottom of the class, but he really needs Hermione, who is a goody two-shoes, nerd character, to help him succeed academically. He's not especially good at magic. He's average, right? He points this out in the fifth book. He's they're like, hey, you have to teach us about the dark arts. He's like, I just kind of survived by luck. And no, that's it. It's you know how to improvise, you know how to respond to those things. You're actually good at this stuff. And he's like, I'm not really good at it. And it's true. It's he has more or less survived because of the strength of his team, through luck, through things he couldn't really anticipate, as well as just his only good virtue is bravery. So when you think about an everyman character may be a little bit brave, but he's not going to be exceptionally brave, right? Harry Potter is afraid of lots of things, right? Your everyman characters are just going to be normal sort of people that fit in that thing. And one of the reasons I think Harry Potter is so successful is because the main character, Harry Potter, is that middle person. You can project onto Harry Potter almost any kind of trait that you want. He doesn't have a really strong personality, for instance. He's not like the Weasley twins, and he's not like Hermione. So the goal of when you're writing an everyman is really to allow the audience to not just to project onto the character, but to have a character they feel like is not going to be automatically successful, and to have a character that's likable, but really to avoid having a dislikable character. Because if a character has a really strong personality, that can create things that people dislike. If you look at, I don't know, a series like Harry Potter, there's going to be a bunch of characters that people think are bad or like dislike. So he's a really, really good prime example of an everyman. You can think of everyman, you can find everyman in all kinds of pieces of literature. You're going to find them a lot in, for example, like 80s portal fantasy type things, right? Like, Flight of the Navigator or something like that. There's a really typical story presentation where you have a normal boy from a normal world in a boring place, and then he's transferred off into another world. And almost always that boy is going to be, not especially special, right? The characters in, say, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe are everyman sort of characters. They aren't special. And this is actually a complaint that I've heard some people make about, say, Chronicles of Narnia. It's like the children don't seem very special. That's kind of the point. It's that they're normal people who, through their experiences, get transformed into exceptional people. They literally become kings and queens. So that's a different kind of story, by the way, is like a transformational arc. But the character archetype that you start with is often an everyman. If we're going to compare this, we're going to contrast this to a couple of other types. One is what I call Paragon. A Paragon is just a character who's already kind of max level, if you want to think of it in RPG terms. An Obi-Wan Kenobi would be a Paragon. This is a character that is very virtuous or very, very strong. Very, very wise. And their function in a story is usually not as a main character. Okay, their function in the story is to support the growth of another character. They're the Mr. Miyagi of Karate Kid would be the example of a Paragon. Mr. Miyagi is already a master of martial arts. There's no learning to be done. And I think he's a good character to look at, or maybe Obi-Wan, because they're old men. And so as old men, they're physically limited, right? They're, they don't appear as strong as the younger people, like Splinter to the Ninja Turtles. But they have this knowledge that is already maxed out. Like they're done with their growth arc, and therefore they're there to help the younger and more, I guess, inexperienced members of the story to move forward. Gandalf is a Paragon. He's probably the best example of a Paragon, actually. He's Gandalf the Great. Gandalf is orchestrating the adventure. Gandalf has many strategies and many plans. Gandalf is literally an angel. He's a godlike being. Gandalf has magic. Gandalf has lots of things going for him that are other characters don't have, right? Gandalf is, in essence, immortal. He's been around for like 3,000 years. Gandalf dies and is sent back by the Valar, right? So Gandalf is a perfect example of a Paragon. Now, Gandalf is acting in the story, but when we look at the various parts of Lord of the Rings, where's the perspective emphasis? It's not told exactly in a personal, personal perspective, but the emphasis is on the perspective of the hobbits, or maybe Aragorn and Gimli, and less Legolas, but mostly Aragorn. So it's from a mortal perspective, and therefore Gandalf is somewhat distant. We don't understand all his motivations. We don't understand why he's doing everything. We don't even really know what his powers are or how he will exercise them. But we trust Gandalf to take us where we need to go. Gandalf is the leader of the party in Book 2 of Lord of the Rings. Not Two Towers, but Book 2 of Fellowship of the Ring, second half. He takes them south, takes them through Moria, where he eventually sacrifices himself and dies. And of course, being a Paragon, he is fully virtuous, right? He's like an angel. He's like a messenger of God. So when the time comes for him to sacrifice himself so that the ring bearer can live, that his friends can live, he really has no hesitation doing it. He just acts in the most virtuous way possible when he does that. Now, it's not to say he doesn't have any personality, right? Paragons often have a really sharp personality, and Gandalf does. He's often kind of harsh with the other characters. Great fool of a took. Throw yourself in next time. This is a serious adventure, not a hobbit walking party. throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity, right? So usually the Paragon is not the main character. You're going to find more Paragons that are main characters in things that are like Japanese, for example. It's just a more common thing is to have kind of like fully powerful characters like as the main focus of a story as you go on. But I think the more common one, if you're looking at things like manga, is the everyman. This is especially true of like romance manga or anime. Like romantic comedy stuff, you're looking at the male characters almost always just like an average Joe. He's not a special guy. He might have one special trait that they decide on. So if you're watching something like, which one am I thinking of? Oh man, the one with Taiga as a little tsundere character. What's her name? What was the name of that? And the name is slipping my mind. But the main character in that, he's a complete average Joe, except he's a clean freak. That's the only thing that's like, well, we got to give him one kind of weird thing. He's a clean freak. Paragons could be protagonists as well. John Carter, Doc Savage, Superman, Captain America, right? Yeah. This is one of the things that I think typically makes. Let's look at Superman actually, because Superman is by definition a paragon, right? He's created to be a hyper virtuous character. He's all the things that we wish we could be as human beings. He's super strong. He's super powerful. He's super good. He uses his powers for good. He's not tempted by evil. And sometimes you put Superman in stories where he's like tempted to do evil or things like that. And that's interesting, except it kind of breaks down because it's like, it doesn't fulfill the role of Superman. Superman is more about how he's overcoming particular problems, right? That's where, Superman's, I guess, conflict comes from. It's not so much like the failure of Superman is not him dying, though he gets killed in I think in 1990 or something. They had Doomsday kill him. It's not Superman getting killed. It's Superman failing to save the innocent. It's his fail state. So it's more like plot driven, right? If you have the Paragon, then you don't really have to worry about developing a character. You can just have plot. Similar to the Paragon is what some people call the competent man. Competent man is not a paragon because he's not necessarily super virtuous. James Bond is the perfect example of a competent man. James Bond is very good at what he does. He comes into the story being very good at something. Actually, even better one's probably Sherlock Holmes. Now that I'm thinking about it. Sherlock Holmes, the expert detective, hyper intelligent, somewhat eccentric, right? He's an eccentric kind of individual. They often come up with more eccentricities for him each time that he's adapted into screen or stage or something like that. He's a really, really good example of one. The story of a Sherlock Holmes story is not about Sherlock Holmes growing up or learning important moral lessons. It's about Sherlock Holmes solving a mystery. So the important part is that the mystery is solved. It's not that Sherlock Holmes learns an important lesson. Rather, it would be the other characters that might learn an important lesson before Sherlock Holmes were to learn an important lesson. So it is about the plot. So if you have a character, there's a belief that you have to have a character development in stories. That's just not true. You can, when I usually point out the problem with no character development is that it's a story for the character to grow in, and the character doesn't really grow. The character's already fully powered up. So that's a really common thing that I think is bad about a lot of newer blockbuster movies is they'll put in a female character and she's just a Mary Sue. And so that brings me, I guess, to the last of this set of character archetypes. We have an everyman, a paragon, we have a competent man, then we have a Mary Sue. A Mary Sue is a bad character archetype, and it's typical because it's part of bad writing. It is always bad and will never be good, except if you do it as a joke like with One Punch Man. So One Punch Man would be a Mary Sue, but the entire point of One Punch Man is that he has, I don't know what to call it, he has an existential crisis over being One Punch Man and being all powerful. And the existential crisis is what do you live for when you are powerful, more powerful than anybody or any challenge that you face? He longs to be challenged. That's One Punch Man. And so it puts the story conflict just on a completely different wacky level and allows for a lot of humor in that regard. But it's not a serious presentation of like a competent man, for instance. So Mary Sue is kind of all of these things, but broken. So Mary Sue doesn't have any growth, but the Mary Sue is also put in a position where a normal character would have to learn something in order to overcome a challenge, right? You have a conflict, you need to resolve that conflict by having the character do things, and maybe they learn some stuff along the way, they come up with a solution to the conflict, and then they resolve it. So Mary Sue would be like, okay, there's a conflict, I know how to resolve it. And, every obstacle I happen to have a solution for until I just solve the conflict, or I just solve the conflict immediately. Mary Sue's come in already being as good as they can be. The top graduate at Starfleet Academy, Mary Sue. Ensign Mary Sue, the youngest graduate of Starfleet Academy, comes on board. Oh, there's a problem. Captain Kirk, I know the solution to the problem. Oh, there's another problem. Captain Kirk, I know the solution to that problem, right? Every problem is presented as an opportunity for the Mary Sue to solve that problem. There's no failure state. There's no failure in her. And you can usually, it's like, it's not just a character, it's how the character functions in a story. So as you watch the story, the character becomes a Mary Sue through watching the story. And that's because the character never fails. The character always has a solution to every roadblock that's put in the way of the plot, never has to rely on another person, never has to think, never has a significant challenge. So if you were to put, let's think of like if you were to put a Mary Sue in Raiders of the Lost Ark, for instance, instead of having to go in and do a lot of work to convince Marion, the Mary Sue would go in and just, she'd be immediately fall in love with him because of his beautiful attractiveness. We're imagining a male Mary Sue, like a Gary Stu. So you would just miss all of that action that happens. You wouldn't have to figure out like any of the stuff. You would just go, okay, I know it's over here because I happen to have 3 degrees in Egyptology. In addition to my degree in biblical studies and my mastery of the Hebrew language, I know what all of this stuff means, right? Like there would be no sense of tension because she would just solve everything. The guy would come out with a sword, and the joke of like him shooting with the pistol, she would have a sword and then would fence him and kill him with a sword, right? So like some of the humor that exists in something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the guy flashes the sword and Indy shoots him with a pistol, that would just be gone because you would look at that as like, okay, well, the Mary Sue, she happened to be a fencing champion as well. And she studied HEMA since the time she was 8. So each time there would be an obstacle, be like, well, I can't believe you're flashing that sword at me, considering I've studied HEMA since the age of 8. And she pulls out a sword and like chops this guy to pieces, right? That would be a Gary Stu presentation of it. They'd get to the they'd catch the Ark, and it wouldn't be like a matter of like being prisoners or something like that. They would blow up all the Nazis, take the Ark back, and then she would happen to know that you weren't supposed to open the Ark because they aren't archpriests of Israel, right? Or something like that. So they would put the Ark, they would put the Ark away. You wouldn't have any of the action. You wouldn't have that, the ghosts or the angels coming out and killing all the Nazis. You'd miss like all the cool moments of that movie by having a character that's too competent to be challenged by the plot. Now, Indy is a competent man. Indy doesn't really need to grow a whole lot in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but the plot still presents challenges for him that he has to overcome. He, imagine like there's that fight with the Nazi, the big bodybuilding Nazi, and like the Gary Stu would just be a bigger version and be like, haha, I'm actually bigger than you. And he'd rip off his shirt and be shredded like Arnold and just pummel him to bits. Not have to like, dance around him and get beat up and then have the propeller kill him. Right. So all of those moments where Indy gets to a challenge is like, how do I get this challenge? Oh, I'll trick him into getting killed by some other means. You wouldn't have any of that. A Gary Stu or a Mary Sue would blast through all of those obstacles like, a freight train over quarters or something, or whatever analogy you want to use. And so this is the thing people miss about it. People who get offended by the term Mary Sue just aren't really thinking about what makes a character compelling or good, or how you execute a story that a character is supposed to be challenged by. So it's really how the character functions in the story. They're not challenged. There's nothing to stop them from solving the problems of the plot. There's nothing to stop them from solving the conflict, which means that it's a low tension story. So when you were watching a story with low tension, it gets boring, right? I have multiple people tell me Force Awakens was just boring. And I'm like, it's easy to know why. It's because the characters just sort of blast through every obstacle. And there's twice as many obstacles as there needs to be as a result, because it's like, oh, she's captured. Okay, well, obviously she needs to be saved. Well, she just frees herself. It's like, okay. Things like that. So I've never seen Star Wars Rebels, so I have no idea whether Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels is a Mary Sue or not. So, okay, so I've never watched it. I have no idea. I've seen arguments that John Carter is a Gary Stu. Every character compliments him on being the best ever at everything. He has unexplained immortality, etc. I haven't watched John Carter stuff to comment on that, but I mean, he could be. But I don't really know. There's also... This is not a character archetype necessarily, but it could be. I guess we could consider one, which is the chosen one. So what's the chosen one? And we'll move away from like the Mary Sue stuff. Mary Sue is really about how like you're badly executing a plot, just as much as you're badly executing the character. The character is good at anything the plot needs them to be good at. The plot presents no challenges to the character. It's just a badly constructed story in total. Remember, these things don't exist in like a vacuum. It's not like the character exists absent of the story in which he functions. The story is a whole thing, and we are looking at stories throughout time, and we're taking out character archetypes and looking at typical usage of characters, the way characters are typically used in a plot, typically written, typically used within a setting. And we're making a couple of conclusions about those, which we can then use to inform some of our artistic decisions in our own books. So I want to go back to the point I made right when I started this stream, which is that these are not prescriptions. These are not prescriptions. These are not things that you ought to do. You don't ought to use an everyman character. Rather, that's the way that other authors have used characters in the past, and it's a way to categorize their use. That's it. So how you execute it is up to you as the artist, as the writer, and you don't have to follow and copy what people have done before for your book to be good. In fact, you want to take risks and do things that are a little bit outside the box, no matter what you're doing. The old logline rule is same but different. So the different part is what most people fall. They're like, how do I do the same part? I'm like, well, you really got to think about how you can do the different part, because that's what's going to make your story interesting, versus like, how do I make sure I do it exactly right? I'm like, well, there's no exactly right? There's many different ways to execute all of the things that I'm talking about. So that's one of the things. As we move away from that, let's talk about the chosen one. This is for a certain kind of story where we need a special hero to solve a special problem. You've probably seen many chosen one stories over the years. Now, as time has gone on, there's been less popularity to be really explicit about some chosen one, meaning like destiny or fate has chosen a character for a special task, and that's basically the story. It's really common in games, though. It's in like an almost every game, because if you're playing as the protagonist and he's killing everyone, he's got to be the chosen one on some level, right? So you have to think about, how all that stuff works. Yeah, I've heard this story, by the way, Hardwick, like that Ford ad-libbed the Indy shooting the swordsman because he was sick. They storyboarded him fighting with his whip, and he's already good at his whip, right? And if Vinder's meat getting accidentally perfectly sliced by the swordsman, that would be pretty fun too. You think about the action and execution, but it's a good way that, how am I going to overcome this swordsman? I'll use the thing I already know. But shooting him is even better. That's like an even funnier way to do it. I've heard that as well. Anyway, what was I saying? Chosen one. So the chosen one is just, it has really ancient roots going all the way back to like Greek tragedy and Greek drama. That somebody is specially chosen by the gods for a particular task, and then they have to go about doing it. You could think of Luke Skywalker as a chosen one. That's probably the biggest one that I can think of. Harry Potter is also a chosen one. Notice I said he's an everyman, and then we have a chosen one. So you can have different kinds of treatments overlap. And as Harry Potter goes deeper into his story, the chosen one thing gets revealed. What's important to think about with a chosen one, the chosen one doesn't choose himself. He's chosen by someone else. Either he's like from birth trained to do something, or he's chosen by the gods, or by destiny or fate or something like that. And the way that functions is usually that whatever kind of character he is, he has to somehow transform into what the conflict requires him to be in order to solve that problem. So something like Star Wars, he starts as a farm boy and he has to become Jedi Master, right? He has to become a monk, a warrior monk, strong enough to like beat the most badass dude in the galaxy. Like that's his destiny. There's other things too that are chosen ones, more subtle ones. You wouldn't think of someone like Frodo as being a chosen one. He kind of is, though. He sort of functions as one. He's the chosen ring bearer. They've chosen him to do something. And he's not really up to the task when you think about it, but they choose him because he is the most virtuous. And because the ring is sin, and he's carrying a burden of sin, having a high degree of virtue is what's going to help him to overcome the challenges that he faces on his journey. He's chosen by the council to do it. So he is a chosen one on one level. When people say chosen one, what they think of is like, the High King by Lloyd Alexander or someone like that. They think of King Arthur as chosen by the Lady of the Lake, right? They think of some sort of mythological use of this. That the person is chosen and they're just magically special. But when we're writing literature, we almost never have the chosen one just be like a magically special good person. Rather, the chosen one is some other kind of character that's in a plot that requires them to be the chosen one. And oftentimes they doubt themselves. They're like, I'm not that. Think of like Neo in the Matrix, right? It's like, am I the one? He's the chosen one. But he's really just an everyman. He's some guy, works in an office, hacks by night in his 90s with his 90s CRTs. And he gets chosen to be that. He always was that, right? So this is, I guess, part of the function of the chosen one is like the chosen one was always chosen. But his character archetype is often not that. It's like he'll be transformed into a paragon. He'll transform into something that is higher. That's the usual way that gets presented. So you think of Luke as an everyman at the start of the story. He really becomes a paragon by the end. He's highly virtuous. He's fully developed. He's very powerful, those sorts of things. So character growth is usually a function of the kind of story that you're telling, and not every story needs character growth. Continuing on. Macbeth is sort of a darkened version of a chosen one. That's a good way of thinking of it, right? He's chosen. So in Greek tragedy, people are chosen not for glory necessarily, but for tragedy. Now, this is what I find very compelling. Before I move on and talk about like secondary character archetypes, let's finish this one. So think about Oedipus Rex. There's a type of destiny function in Greek literature, like Greek drama and Greek mythology too, that has a sense of irony to it that I find very compelling. And Oedipus Rex is probably the best example I can think of. Now, if you're looking at the play of Oedipus Rex, it's happening not just in media res, but like at the end. This is when the destiny, the dark destiny, is actually revealed to Oedipus, which is that he has unwittingly killed his father and married his mother and produced children by his own mother. He puts out his eyes. How did that happen? Well, you go to an oracle and the oracle tells you a prophecy. What you'll often find is that the oracle tells a prophecy which can be interpreted multiple ways, and there's often the characters act in a way that brings about the prophecy in an unexpected and ironic way, dramatically ironic way. So the Oedipus Rex's father hears that his son is destined to kill him and marry his mother. So what does he do? I'll stop this from happening. I'll just kill the infant. No big deal. We'll kill the baby. In Greek culture, you could leave an infant out for exposure. An unwanted child, you could just kill it. It didn't count as a person. Sounds crazy, right? We have it in our own society, just in an earlier, less obviously human stage, right? He's got to kill his son. What happens? The son gets left out to be exposed, and he gets saved by a shepherd. The shepherd takes him away, raises him as his own. So he doesn't die. He doesn't end up dying, but rather there's an intervention. The destiny is going to fulfill itself now. So by sending his son away, intending to kill his son, but ending up sending his son away, he sets up the board in such a way that the son can fulfill the destiny that the oracle has set. So what does the son do? Well, he grows up. I'm trying to remember the specific details. He runs into his father doing something bad. I don't remember what he's doing. He's attacking a peasant or something. Intervenes, ends up killing him. Comes over to the kingdom, ends up marrying the queen, right? Who he doesn't know is his mother. Now, if he hadn't left the infant out for exposure, would Oedipus have done those things? No. By trying to avoid destiny, you create the conditions which cause the destiny to finally happen. Right. So Oedipus is a chosen one, but for a tragic end rather than for a good end. And Macbeth could be one as well. Macbeth is such a good play to look at for lots of different reasons. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. So yeah, you can have this happen on the opposite. So what kind of person is the chosen one? It could be anything. Very often in modern treatments, he starts as an everyman and he becomes like a paragon kind of character. Think of Neo at the beginning, Neo at the end of book 3 being a Christ-like figure, kind of ascending to be something special. That's a transformative treatment of a character. And I've done that to an extent. It's not a chosen one thing, but I did it with Water of Awakening. A lot of people miss sort of the deeper themes that are going on there about like the intransience of the self. But, that's what it is. It's the character transforms into something else. There's strong parallels between Macbeth and King Saul, even down to both consulting witches. Yeah. Saul, there's, you can find these things in the Bible too, by the way, right? Like Samson, as a kind of a tragic figure, right? I love the story of Samson. It's one of the best tragedies, I think, of, the classical age. What's his one weakness is women, right? And gets betrayed to his downfall. Great tragedy. But anyway, we're not talking about tragedy today. Let's talk about some secondary character archetypes. So you have character archetypes that will function primarily as like a main character, a protagonist. Then you have a lot of character archetypes that are there to support the protagonist. They're B and C story ones. They're intended to be a romantic interest, or they're intended to be some sort of companion character. So one of the best ones I think is I call it the best friend character. It's Subutai in Conan the Barbarian movie, right? It is, in fact, Conan often has a best friend character in the Robert E. Howard stories, depending on, might be a wise man or, things like that. So it's a best friend. The best friend is a kind of a foil to whatever the protagonist happens to be. If the protagonist is a very strong heroic character like Conan, then Subutai is not going to be as strong or as brave, but he's going to be maybe a little more clever He's going to be cautious. He's going to be a thief. He can do things that the main character can't do and will help the main character to reassess challenges that the main character comes across. So you can think of Ron Weasley as the best friend in Harry Potter, Supadai in Conan the Barbarian. You can think of Morpheus is really like a paragon, but there's no like, you don't have to have a best friend character. Samwise Gamgee in the Lord of the Rings series and movies is the best friend. He's there to support the protagonist and to help the protagonist and to be, in a lot of ways, the opposite of the protagonist. So I think Frodo and Sam are probably the best example I can think of off the top of my head. Or maybe Sherlock Holmes and Watson, right? Watson is there to be a foil to Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock, I don't know what you're thinking. It's elementary, my dear Watson. Let me reveal to you the secret that you have overlooked. But Watson has a kind of more down-to-earth approach. He's the voice of the everyman to the competent Sherlock Holmes, helping Sherlock to reassess a situation and suddenly jump to the correct conclusion about a story sometimes, depending on like the treatment for Sherlock Holmes. But Sam and Frodo, I think, are great, because Samwise is the opposite of Frodo in so many ways. Frodo is cautious. Frodo is very wise. Samwise, even though that's his name, is not wise. He is, I don't want to call him stupid, but he's he's a country bumpkin. Whereas Frodo is he's elvish. He's very well educated. He's a gentleman. And Samwise is the gardener. He's gardener. But Samwise is very heroic in his own way. He's really willing to risk his life and limb. And Frodo's like, nope, Sam, that's stupid. Don't do that. Let's be more cautious, right? Whereas Sam is ready to rush in and do things. Sam is a cook. Frodo's not. Sam has a lot of earthy kind of knowledge of practical things, how to tie knots and ropes, how to cook, how to make fires, how to do all of the things a gentleman probably wouldn't know how to do, including maybe how to be brave in the right circumstance. He has a lot of practical farmer knowledge, whereas Frodo has the more book knowledge, the knowledge of history, the deeper philosophical heroism of Frodo. So they're a great foil to each other. Sam has, of course, his own character arc where he grows and learns and becomes a wise person himself, really almost after the adventure, but kind of as a result of the adventure. And Frodo is like, he wouldn't have gotten very far without Sam. That's kind of stepping back when you have that moment in, it's in the Two Towers in the book. I don't remember which movie it's in. It might be in Two Towers movie. You take a step back and you look at the role of them. And Sam is very humble. And Frodo's like, I need you to think of yourself as a more important person. Your loyalty and your steadfastness is essential to me completing my task. And then at a certain point, like in the movies, they have that scene where like he carries Frodo up there. Frodo really can't have done it without Sam doing it. Okay. So there's an example of a secondary characteristic. It's the best friend. The best friend can be sort of like our other character archetypes, like Ron Weasley maybe is sort of an everyman, but he's really more like he's really like an everyman like Harry. That's why they get along. He's not particularly good at anything. But he's, in the function of that story, Harry's a fish out of water. Ron understands the world. And so they're a foil to each other. Ron's like, I can't believe you don't understand this stuff. And Harry's like, I don't understand this stuff because I live with normal people called muggles. And it's like, oh, that's weird. I didn't know that electricity was electrons. What are you talking about? That foil with each other. That's what best friends tend to do. There's usually a couple of different kinds of romantic archetypes that you're going to see. People on the channel have pointed out like the manic pixie dream girl. I'm not sure where this came from, but it's an idealization of the female. Kind of, I would consider it as people have described it. I would consider it actually not a kind of character I would use. That is, it's an ideal form for the main character or the reader. A character who's beautiful but accessible, maybe full of these contradictions. Beautiful but accessible, meaning like beautiful but not so beautiful that you can't get her as a girlfriend or as a wife. She has eccentric tastes that happen to line up with yours. She is there to deliver you from ordinariness and into the excitement of the extraordinary, right? That's her function. But more often, I think with good romantic relationships, what you have with a romantic interest is a C-story character, a character who is in many ways going to be a foil to the protagonist. The way the main character is, but in a different sort of way. Because rather than it being like, you need to rethink this, it's like there's more of a tension or conflict between the two. The romantic interest, whether it's male or female, tends to have to do some sort of alteration to meet the protagonist, and the protagonist has to change something to meet the romantic interest. So I don't know what to call this character. I'm going to call it the boyfriend, because we see it more in romantic comedies where it is the male character that the female character wants to be pursued by, or romances. So in romance, your love interest is going to typify a couple of things. It's going to be someone that there's an initial conflict with. We don't get along. But not so much of a conflict that they're like an antagonist. Rather, the love interest has a different idea of how to do things. The love interest thinks of themselves as better than the protagonist and has to get knocked down a peg in order to view the protagonist as like someone who's good. So the love interest, whereas the protagonist might have challenges, the love interest will probably fail at something and have to be saved by the protagonist, which will make them like the protagonist more and finally accept that the conflict that they've been having with each other is actually just attraction that's been masked. And then when they matriculate the relationship, that's usually the end of the story, like within a romance. So you think about how these character archetypes function. The romantic interest is usually going to be the opposite of the protagonist, at least initially, and then they make some adjustments to finally come together. Usually with the plot, there's a problem that the love interest needs the protagonist to solve for them. So, like in the book Rainmaker by John Grisham, the love interest is in an abusive relationship with her evil husband, and the protagonist has to save her from that abusive relationship. Seems pretty simple. Now, as far as how her character has a bunch of virtue things. She's good, she's kind, she's sweet. What's her vice? It's that she won't leave her rotten ex-husband. So the love interest always will have some sort of set of virtues or not necessarily virtues, but something that the protagonist will find desirable. We flip it. Let's look at romances, which are usually female protagonist, male love interest. The male love interest will usually have a couple of things going for him. For the, I don't know let's call him the boyfriend character. I shouldn't call him the boyfriend. I'm just going to call him the love interest, because I haven't done a video on this, but this is the way that it will end up working. The love interest will be very attractive for a male character. He's going to have a dangerous side to him, whereas the protagonist is usually going to be kind of a goody two-shoes, to kind of do it by the book kind of person. And he's going to draw her into his perspective of like, we should do it a little bit naughtily, right? These are important things for a reader of romance to like the protagonist. We need the protagonist to be very masculine. And that means he needs to be a bit of a rule breaker. So he's going to be, and then your protagonist is going to be someone who tends to stick by the rules and be smart about things. And the love interest is more of like a little bit of a bad boy. But the attraction of the bad boy is that you get him on her side, and then he will rescue the protagonist. This happens in Twilight, I don't even halfway through the book. She's about to get hit by a car, and the vampire rescues her with his strength, right? And he's like, I must resist my attraction to you, that sort of stuff. And she has to, they have to kind of meet in the middle and come to terms with what they're doing in order to matriculate a relationship. So that's the love interest. You'd think he'd be a little more wary of marrying much older women. And Sherlock Watson is very competent in many things, but Sherlock is more. I always feel that one of Watson's roles is to show just how extreme Sherlock is. Am I off track? I don't think so. I think Watson is a foil. Watson's down to earth. It's not that he's incompetent, but he has like just a normal sense of things. Whereas Sherlock is able to like transcend that and be like hyper intelligent. So the way, and this is somewhat with adaptations, right? With adaptations, you usually get Watson as like, Sherlock Holmes is very eccentric and very intelligent, and Watson is very down to earth and kind of, hey, come back down here and think realistically, right? Han Solo and Princess Leia is a perfect example of the love interest, how it functions. Now, Han Solo happens to also be another character archetype, which is a bad boy. So when I talk about the love interest having these sort of traits in this sort of function, that's how you see it used a lot. But a bad boy is a thief with a heart of gold. That's the bad boy. So let's call him a thief with a heart of gold. Not just a bad boy, but a thief with a heart of gold. What is a thief with a heart of gold? This is a character that's very masculine, is roguish, is dangerous, is doing things that are perhaps a little wrong. But he has a good heart deep inside. He's a thief with a heart of gold. So ultimately, he ends up doing good things. I think Han Solo is probably the best example that I can think of that. He's a smuggler. He ends up becoming, he has his own growth arc. He becomes like a general in the rebel army or whatever. The thief with a heart of gold has to give up his bad ways in a story and embrace his inner virtue. That's what the Solo, a Star Wars story is actually about as well. It's like you have to do good things. Like you have to not be bad and instead be good. That's the sort of the growth, the movement that a thief with a heart of gold character will have. Very common archetype that you see in lots of different stories. Conan would probably fit that at different times, as would Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. They're very roguish and very bad, but they also do good things. They're I can't just kill this person. That wouldn't be cool, right? They're not straight up evil. They're kind of a chaotic character, a neutral character, a character who's kind of in the middle of things. Thief with a heart of gold. That's a good character. I think that's a really common. I mean, it could be a protagonist as well. It could be any kind of character you want, but it's a common one as well. What about the tragic heroine like Medea? Sorry if you already answered this. I just got here. Yeah, tragic. A tragic hero. Let's just talk about heroes for a minute. There's character archetypes. So when we talk about heroes, and we're going to go back to like the classical era. A hero is like a demigod. A hero is specially powered to do something and does great works and overcomes insane challenges. So a hero is not just a character archetype, it's a type of story. A hero is better than normal people physically, mentally. Maybe he's more attractive too. And therefore his challenges are insanely higher than a normal person's. Conan, Cole, Solomon Kane, all of those are heroes. They're heroes whose power is greater than a normal person's, and therefore all of their challenges are fantastical. Turin Turambar from Children of Hurin, he's a hero. His prowess is far beyond other people's through destiny, through genetics, whatever it is. Therefore, he has to seek out greatness that's that much higher. It's like Hercules, right? Hercules is... this is why I didn't like the Disney treatment of Hercules, because Hercules went from like zero to hero. No, Hercules was always the strongest person in the world that there ever was. His challenges were about like figuring out how to kill the Hydra. Oh, okay, I'll cut the heads off and you burn the necks, right? So Hercules often needs help. He often has to think with his brain instead of just crushing things with his tremendous strength. At least mythologically, right? But a hero, or, Perseus or Jason and the Golden Fleece, those sorts of things. A hero is someone who's specially made. It's not like a chosen one, like you're chosen for a special task. He's just, he He's a character that in a type of story where there's a challenge that's beyond mortal reckoning. That's heroic, right? Most of my fantasy tends to be about heroes. They're doing things that are beyond like the mortal ken, like killing a dragon or something like that is going to be a heroic act. And therefore heroic fiction is going to center around doing really fantastical, crazy, outside of normal reality kind of things. Luke Skywalker is a hero. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a hero. We'll talk about a tragic hero. What's a tragic hero? Well, it's a hero that suffers a downfall. That's a tragic hero. So this is a function in a tragedy. So it's really hard to isolate a character archetype from a type of story. This is one that's included in a type of story. So a tragic hero suffers a downfall because of his hubris or his ambition, some vice that holds him back from fully exercising his virtue and his strength and his like God-given ability. Most often it's hubris, that is like pride and belief, too much belief in oneself and one's capabilities causes your downfall. You become blind to the dangers that are going to destroy you. And then when they do destroy you, it is painful, right? You can think of Macbeth as a tragic hero, right? Saul from the Bible is a tragic hero. My favorite, though, is definitely Samson, if we're looking at Bible characters. What is Samson's great weakness? So a tragic hero is just a hero, but he has some weakness, some flaw, a tragic flaw that causes him to suffer a downfall. He's still bigger and stronger than normal people. Like Samson can break the bonds, pick up a jawbone, and just go to town with the Holy Spirit, killing everybody. He's like godlike power, right? He's like a demigod, is Samson's level of power in the Bible. What's his downfall? His downfall is his lust for women. He wants women, and he wants Delilah. Delilah's the second one, right? There's a whole thing where he's marrying a Philistine, and if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have guessed my riddle. I'll go get you your cloaks and tunics that I promised you. I'll go get him. He goes over to the Philistine village, kills everyone, takes their cloaks and tunics and gives them to him. Here you go. I killed all of your countrymen to give you that. Ironic, isn't it? There's literature in the Bible has forms. It exists in literature forms as well when you study it. So what's his tragic flaw? It's lust. It's that he wants women and he trusts them too much and he can't say no to a woman. Oh man, it's perfect. And such a great lesson for biblical anyone, right? Anyone that reads the Bible. What a great lesson to like remember that all of your strength, and he learns his lesson at the end. All of his strength comes from God. It is not his own. So he prays to God, give me strength, one last burst of strength. And the Holy Spirit comes upon him and he kills all the Philistines and himself as well. Grant me revenge for this. The term Manic Pixie Dream Girl was coined by a critic to describe Kirsten Dunst's character in Elizabethtown. Zooey Deschanel is usually seen as the epitome of the archetype. Yeah, it's I don't know enough about it, but it's more like, a bad romantic interest is the way I view it. It's a romantic interest that's kind of farcical and it's fitting of a certain, she's perfect, she's beautiful, but she's also approachable somehow. It's kind of Zooey Deschanel is a good example. Zooey Deschanel is attractive. She has these like piercing blue eyes. But she's usually shown with dark hair, which actually makes her more approachable. This is weird, but it's true. You notice that if we want to make a female approachable in a story, what color hair are we going to give her? Brown hair, black hair. We're not going to make her a blonde. Blondes are like automatically a higher level for some reason. I think it's because we're speaking English, and in England, not everyone. In England, there's all these different hair colors. There's brown and black and blonde and red, and right. In the British Isles, there's a huge diversity because of all these people that settled. There were the Celts. They were kind of brown-haired there originally. They got pushed out to the Celtic fringe by the Saxons, who were blonde-haired and blue-eyed. They were Germanic. They were conquered by the Normans, who were actually Scandinavians that had settled in France. So therefore, they were red-haired and blonde-haired, predominantly blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic people. There was lots of Vikings and Danes. That's how the red hair got there, right? You know, there's lots of red-haired people in Ireland, probably from Viking DNA. Is the last explanation I've heard. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You know, there's more subtlety to it than that. But, you know, there's all these different hair colors. But for whatever reason, you know, that translates into when we're making something for a story, the approachable girl has mousy brown hair. She has something that stops her from being a 10. Glasses. You actually see this with stuff like teen movies where like the kind of mousy girl takes off her glasses and does her hair, and all of a sudden she's a 10 or a 9 or something, right? That's a really common fantasy, because I think that's the female fantasy, is like, if I just changed my hair, I'd be a 10 like those girls. No, but you know, you actually can maybe go up a couple points if you put yourself together really well. It's like the secret 10 hiding out in the library, but her hiding out in the library and wearing glasses makes her really approachable. Now, this is going to sound really dark and weird, but one of the things you can tell with, as far as like creating a romantic interest for a man or a male audience, is things like trends in pornography. As weird as this sounds, people have studied it. Why would a porn star wear glasses? It's to fulfill this sort of fantasy that she's approachable, right? Oh, it makes her cute. No, it makes her less attractive. Why would you want to watch someone that's less attractive? Because you're engaging in a fantasy. Men are engaging in a fantasy when they use pornography. And so they're engaging in a fantasy that's more realistic by adding things like glasses to the mix, or brown hair, or something like that. Basically things that dial off the hotness scale by like 1 point. 2 points. I could get a girl. You know, I could get a girl with glasses. That's what men want to fantasize about. You know, manic pixie dream girl is attractive, vivacious, eccentric woman who helps a timid man come out of his shell, cast his inhibitions aside, and live life to the fullest. That's what Archetypes says for that. To me, that's always, I mean, that sounds like kind of a missed, you know, romantic interest. That the man changes to fit her, right? Helps him come out of his shell. The eccentric part is interesting, because men fantasize about women who like the same things as them. That's, you know, it's like gamer girl bathwater. Do you really think that these OnlyFans girls give a shit about video games? No. Why are they doing video game streams and boob streams on Twitch? It's because men have a fantasy of being with a woman who's into the same things as them. So I'm going to get with a girl who's into heavy metal and JRPGs. It's like, bro, cool if you find her. She's probably a 4. But the manic pixie dream girl is like, well, she's an 8 wearing glasses, but she's into Sepultura and Final Fantasy. Good luck, dude. I mean, I'm super attracted to my wife. She is not into the same things as me at all, friends. She doesn't like heavy metal. She really likes Christmas. I'm not a big fan of Christmas. She, you know, we work together. She's a musician, and so we have that in common for sure. We have our value system in common. That's the big one, honestly. Just to have an aside, right? If you're looking for a partner in life, the most important thing by far is that you have values which are in common. Not that you have interests that are in common. When I see people writing stories where like, here's this woman with these eccentric interests and I find them so interesting, it's like, you must not have a lot of experience with women, right? Everyone has interests, but that's not what makes a person a good partner. It's the person's virtue. So if I really want to write a really good romantic partner for someone, I'm going to write her virtue. That's what I'm going to try to show, is that she has virtue. She's kind, or she's brave, or she's hardworking and diligent, or she's humble, or she's intelligent, right? Those are the things that are going to be like, this is a person worth having. If I were going to construct like a love triangle, not to get too far out of field here, but you know, just let's brainstorm. Let's think about the hypothetical for a minute. I'm going to do a brainstorm of like a a love triangle. 2 girls, all right? So girl number 1 is going to be the manic pixie dream girl, like what Hardwick Bento says. She's going to be this vivacious girl with all of these like eccentric things. She's going to be into metal, and the character's like, yeah, she's into metal. And she's like, oh, and then we have girl number 2. Girl number 2 is boring. Girl number 2 is a boring girl. She works at Starbucks. She dresses normally. She's slightly myopic, maybe, right? She's pretty, but she's not super attractive. You know, she's a 7, let's say. Let's say she's a 7. You know, she goes to the gym, but she's not a gym bunny, right? She listens to the radio, doesn't have any special taste with music. She maybe is a little bit of she reads books, but she's not a bookworm. She's average. Now, how would I do this? Well, obviously, the guy's going to choose the really eccentric one. Modern writers would do it so like the man is with the boring woman and the manic pixie dream girl comes in and sucks him out of the boring relationship. I would do the opposite of that. The man is unattached, let's say at the beginning, and he becomes interested in the manic pixie dream girl, and she's a chaos of horribleness. And the average girl comes in and stops him from making a big mistake and saves him, and he sees her virtue. He sees that she really cares about him. And suddenly, bang, like a light bulb, he becomes attracted to her, not because she likes heavy metal, but because she likes him. That's how I would write that love triangle. Maybe I will someday. You can use that, by the way. Of course, you can adapt it to your own style, do everything that's like that. So whenever a character has to make a choice in a romance, you want the choice to be between, in some ways, an extreme. So let's think of a typical romance love triangle from a female perspective would have this, but just inverted. So rather than a manic pixie dream girl, you have an alpha male. The alpha male's rich. He's attractive. He has abs. Right? He's dangerous. He's hot. And he likes the protagonist. Character B. He's boring. He's an accountant. He's a statistician. He's the guy behind the scenes. What happens in the course of the, protagonist is really into guy A. What will happen in the course of the story? She'll be into guy B. Guy B will reveal his dangerousness over time. There'll be some situation where guy B has to save her, maybe not from guy A, but from another guy. So she can make the choice, right? Like 2 hot guys are into me. Which one will I choose? That's a very popular female fantasy. For obvious reasons. I mean, it's a popular male fantasy too, but it happens over and over and over again in romance novels. It's very compelling. It's what women fantasize about, is which hot man will I choose? I will choose you. Okay. Oh, he beats up a guy in front of her. Boom. Instantly, he's more attractive. They go to the beach. He takes off his shirt. He's shredded to the bone. Oh, you always wore like boring suits, and I didn't realize that you were in good shape. Now you're more attractive, right? Okay, so that's the way that you get them to trade places. With a male, you would have maybe he's into the 10, but the 10's a bitch, and the 6 likes him. But the 6 takes her glasses off and goes up to an 8, and he ends up with the 8 because she's actually hot too. Hey, that's who he chooses. That's the male version of the love triangle, right? Yeah, we've seen it a million times. So the male fantasy works similarly, but along different lines. Like rather than masculinity, it's more like the feminine side. So the boring girl is actually more feminine because she cares about him. She makes him dinner, and it's like, whoa, she made me dinner, and this hot girl never would have made me dinner. Maybe I like the brunette better. Blondes tease brunettes, please. Like the blonde would do something that is just completely bad, and he has to make a decision whether he's going to dump her or not. That's a really common like romantic comedy thing. Glasses turn hotness +2. That's only because you perceive yourself being a 6, bro. Always. They do this in Hollywood constantly. Glasses do not add to the attractiveness. They make her a better fantasy for you. It's why they do it in pornography. because it makes her more accessible. It makes her seem more accessible with the glasses on. Myopia is a sign of genetic deficiency, guys. It's not attractive. Am I more attractive like this, friends? I'm going to put my reading glasses on. I'm getting older. Or am I more attractive like this? You guys tell me. And my nice gunmetal blue glasses that I used to like put Legos together. Right, I wear my glasses a lot when I work, but you know, or this. I'm a Paragon. I'm a good old boy. What you put on the character changes. You know, I'm a trucker now. You know, lowers it. I do a mullet. I'm a mullet. Got a mullet. Yeah. All of those things change it, right? So I get glasses for the function of them, right? Like, oh, you get smaller glasses. No, I need them big so that I can see every inch of my screen. They're my screen glasses. That's what I use them for. Okay. So it's like, hey. So yeah, you're going to see beauty usually as an ideal, but for men, they'll be slightly less than the ideal. For women, you know, the female character will often be presented with traits that are neither ugly nor attractive. So the female character will say, I'm so pale. Well, pale is not good or bad. Having light skin or dark skin doesn't make you more or less hot. But it's about the woman showing some sort of, not a vulnerability, like a, I don't know what the word is here. You know, she doesn't feel that good about herself. She feels like she's not up to snuff. Well, I have such pale skin. Pale skin is beautiful. Dark skin can be beautiful too. You rarely have characters that say, oh, God, my skin's so dark. Because that's just politically incorrect. So you just go with the pale skin. Right, I have pasty white skin. Like pasty white skin can be hot as hell. Kate Upton has white skin, right? White skin can be beautiful, friends. I wish I was tan like those other girls. To men, it doesn't really matter, guys. So women come up with those sorts of vectors because it's more about women to women comparing and not men's preferences. Men don't tend to have like a skin tone preference. It's like hotness. You line up 20 hot women, there'll be a bunch of different skin tones, and men will probably be into all of them. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl is the female equivalent of the charming rogue who sweeps a maiden with the boring life off into an adventure. They both represent romance plus excitement. And when I hear that, it's sort of like, that seems like a girl for nerds. You know what I mean? Like a nerd's reading it. It's like, if only a girl would sweep me off out of this boring life, make me, you know, love me for no reason, and take me to cool punk rock shows. Bro, be more interesting. Become a more interesting person, and that archetype will not be as interesting to you. So anyway, yeah. Hardwick's given us another one. Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She functions in the story to suck the protagonist off into a land of adventure, and not boring life of doing boring things. Yeah, dude, if your life's boring, man, just like find something interesting and cool to add to it. I think I'm gonna take up trap shooting again this year. I used to do it as a kid. I even did it competitively at times, and I loved it. I'll get back into it, get my son into it. Only problem is I like gave away all my 20 gauge shotguns, like different family members. So I need to get some more 20 gauge and maybe a 410. Get a 410 for the boy, for the wife. Yeah, so why does Superman wear glasses? Clark Kent quality. Let's talk about it. Why does Superman wear glasses? How is the glasses a disguise? Mild-mannered Clark Kent with the glasses. He puts on the glasses and he becomes average. He becomes weak. He becomes genetically deficient. He becomes and here's the thing, guys. Research actually proved this, and this is crazy. You can look it up. Reading books causes myopia, right? Being inside, that there's a strong link now between being inside and developing myopia. I don't have myopia. My left eye is farsighted. My right eye is like 20/20. So I get this because it makes everything bigger and it's easier to focus close. If I wear these, if I start walking around outside wearing these, I'll start wanting to throw up. I get nauseated from the glasses. And you can see like the left prescription is, I have like not only just, not myopia, like macropia. I'm farsighted in my left eye and it has like a slight astigmatism. So it really helps me to have like really good detail vision when I wear these. But I can't wear them outside. But yeah, being inside. So the old thing of like the bookworm wears the glasses and he's a weak nerd who stays inside. It's like, that's actually true, it turns out. Like we aren't just imagining these things. Like these things are real. And that's the transformation of Spider-Man from like a nerd wearing glasses, bookworm science guy into a hero. Right? That's part of the fun of it. So that's another character archetype, is the nerd. He's a bookworm. He's smart. Goody two-shoes nerd. Girls don't like him. You guys should be able to just drop that one in anywhere. It works. This is the guy that doesn't have like social status and doesn't have physical prowess, but he's very smart. So he's usually a secondary character. He helps the protagonist by telling him important information. You make him a main character, you have to transform him into something better than that, or create a story that he has to grow out of that role in, if you're going to use him as a main character. That's the nerd. Nerd is really easy to understand. I might just do another video on the nerd. Spider-Man's a nerd. He becomes a hero. Hermione Granger is a goody two-shoes, but also a nerd. So I called him the goody two-shoes. She's the rule-abiding nerd. But she's smart, so she helps Harry Potter out because she's the goody two-shoes who always studies. So the goody two-shoes is a really important secondary character. Not quite the best friend, but it could be the best friend. Usually it's a secondary character who's going to help the protagonist by pointing out their knowledge deficiencies, help the protagonist by remembering something important, help the protagonist by stopping him from breaking the rules at a very important time, or to be an obstacle to him. She's kind of the voice of reason, right? That's the nerd. So yes, Superman puts on the glasses because then he becomes an average nobody nerd that no one would assume to be Superman. There's the contrast. The contrast between the weak, effeminate Clark Kent. That's how this is like a thing from Kill Bill. That's how Superman sees people. So they don't suspect that he's the heroic, massively virtuous Superman. Right? You look like a Reddit atheist when you wear your glasses. I don't believe you have any reason or evidence to back up that statement that people look dorky with glasses and automatically less attractive. I'm like, bro, lose the glasses and go to a bar. You'll get more numbers. It's going to happen. Get contacts. Why do so many people get contact lenses? Because it makes them more attractive. Why do women wear glasses? And you can do this as a woman. Okay. Relationship advice from a guy who's been married. Therefore, not very good. But anyway. All right. You want a guy to feel comfortable talking to you and asking you out. And you're a hot girl. You should know your hotness. All right. Drop the bullshit of like, I'm the least attractive one. No. Look in the mirror and be like, I'm hot. But I'm really interested in Bill. I think he likes me. But he won't ask me out. Put on glasses. Be like, yeah, I've got glasses. Put on glasses. Put up your hair. Flirt with Bill. Tell him that you like something about him and ask him a personal question, and he'll ask you out. Ooh, it's not hard. Right. Bill just has to get the signal that like, this girl is in my league and this girl likes me. She's asking me a personal question about something that she likes about me. And then you'll be like, okay, maybe she wants to go to dinner. Maybe she likes me. Do you want to go get coffee? I would love to get coffee or dinner. You could ask me to dinner if you want. And that'll work too. All right. Johnny Rico of Starship Troopers described as a tragic hero. He achieves his goals fighting the bugs, but he never rises above his society and ends as a cog in the military machine. Maybe in the book, but I don't think the book is written as a tragedy. I'm not people, maybe if you're new, you don't know, I'm like not a big fan of the Starship Troopers book. I don't think it's a very well written story. It's not very compelling, and I don't like the ideas that are in it either. But to be informed about the ideas, you have to have kind of a deep knowledge of history to know why they're kind of bullshit. But they're very appealing to a certain kind of conservative, I suppose. This idea of like service guarantees citizenship. Well, in the Roman Republic, you couldn't serve unless you were a citizen. They have it completely backwards. Being in the army and working for the government doesn't make you magically virtuous enough to vote. And then it doesn't necessarily even mean you have skin in the game, right? It's the people you're voting to send off to war that have the actual skin in the game. You know, I guess you have skin in the game from paying taxes, right? The truth is, like, republics are usually short-lived because they don't function well with human nature. And we're seeing that with the United States. We've seen it for a long time. You know, that was part of Robert Heinlein's, you know, kind of playing with ideas for how republics could be salvaged. How do you disenfranchise people to keep the right people? And how do you enfranchise the right people and disenfranchise the bad people? And so his solution in the book was like, you service guarantee citizenship. The people who are serving society get a vote in society. And on the surface, that seems like it's really going to work. But that presupposes that the government's already good. You know, working for the government, that you're working for a good government. If you're working for the Soviet Union's government, service guarantee citizenship, is that going to make the Soviet Union better? Or does serving the Soviet government mean you're already buying into the evil ideals of the Soviet Union? It depends where the government's at when you begin a scheme like that. Anyway, that's a whole aside. Blonde hair and green or blue eyes are more pure, like the idea of the Aryan ideal that dates back to ancient times. I think it is an ideal, and it's a classical ideal: light eyes, light hair. You know, I'm sorry, like, and it could upset people. Doesn't mean it's the only beauty standard, but it's one that you just see used again and again. If there's a blonde girl and a brunette, the blonde girl will be the hot one, and the brunette will be the secretly hot one. That's just how it works. It's okay. The gamma fantasy is common in a lot of media. Yeah, nowadays. You have to look at who's writing for Hollywood. It's a lot of gamma males. Like, people get upset about the Vox Day terminology, but when he's on point, I mean, just use it. Yeah. These are like low status males. What do low status males fantasize about? They don't fantasize about ascending to be a high status male and therefore being able to get a good mate. Rather, they fantasize about just being more of themselves and having a high status, having a special woman love him for who he is. That's the gamma fantasy. Rather than being high status and being able to then get a hot girl. Hot girl likes me because she's hot, but she's not that hot because of she has blue hair and she has eccentric tastes, and that's why alpha males won't bang her. Well, that doesn't hold up in 2024. I don't want to get on my black pill thing, right? That doesn't hold up in 2024. Like the 7 who has the glasses still wants the alpha male, guys. And she will often settle for being what is basically a non-exclusive mate of an attractive man, because she gets kind of, I don't know what to call it. Like she gets into like what do we call it? Situationship with like a 9 or a 10 who doesn't, men will happily date down, but not necessarily commit down. So a dude who's like absolutely shredded, 9 out of 10, bodybuilder, alpha male, rich guy will happily bed a 5 or 6. I know that may surprise women, but he can have a 10. Yeah, but he has intense sexual lust, and he will sate it however he wants to. And he also likes variety. So yeah, I remember this story about Gene Simmons, where Gene Simmons is taking this total just nothing girl up to a room, and his roadie's like, Gene, like, why are you with this like frumpy nothing? He's like, listen, man, When you have filet mignon every night, sometimes you just want a hamburger. Right? So men will happily date down. So that woman who seems attainable because you understand yourself at a 5 or 6 level, there's nothing wrong with this, right? You just have to know where you are, right? You see yourself as like a 5 or 6, and you're like, oh man, how could I get a 6 that still like meets my fantasies? It's like, oh, she's eccentric. Sorry, but she's actually already dating the 9 or a 10, but she's his side girl and is upset about it. Right. So you're going to end up in a polyamorous relationship with her where she still has the option to have the fun sex with the attractive guy with abs. You see this with fat acceptance. It's like the girl who's like, we need to do fat acceptance. Still wants the guy who has abs. Sorry. She doesn't want the fat loser with glasses. Doesn't want this guy. I don't want this guy. She wants the hot guy. She still wants him. It doesn't matter if she wants the hot guy to acquiesce to her level and accept her fatness, but she still wants the hot guy. She's not interested in the fatso. So you want to raise your attractiveness, fellas? It's January. Hit that treadmill. Get some running shoes. Start walking and running. Look up a diet plan. Start dieting. I know, like, I just didn't pay attention to my diet at all for Christmas season. And I was really surprised. I was like, oh man, I probably gained like 10 pounds. I got on the scale. It's like I gained a pound. I ate like crap for 3 weeks straight and I gained 1 pound. And then I'm like, in order for me to lose that 1 pound this week, and I really need to lose more because it's spring. I should probably like be on a more like actual diet. I'm like, I have to cut my calories by 3,000 this week. I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot of calorie cutting to do. Anyway, that's my whole thing there, right? So a lot of these things that we're talking about have to do with especially when we're writing romance, has to do with who we are as human beings and how we view things and who the audience is. I think the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is probably very popular with nerdy kind of audiences. So if you're making a book or a movie that's directed towards them, that might be a good character type to use. I don't know. But typically when I would write a love triangle, it would be that maybe the quote less attractive girl that is more virtuous is the one that gets it. There's not a love triangle in Needle Ash, but Sharona, like the love interest girl, she is kind of weird and eccentric and frumpy. Maybe I didn't want to call her fat. Like, she's not fat, but she's not thin and gracile, and she's kind of stupid. She's stupid at times because she's a country bumpkin, and she's really frustrating to the main character, and they're like headbutting until they just fall in love. Kids are playing. It's all fun. Adrian says, I jumped on a bit late, so I'll have to go back and see what I missed. Indiana Jones and Evelyn Carnahan from The Mummy both wear glasses when they're doing scholarly things like teaching or curating a library, but not when adventuring. Yeah. Oh, man. Evelyn Carnahan, she takes his glasses off. She's like, bam, 10. She's hot. Pasty versus alabaster. Yeah. So you describe yourself as pale or pasty. Alabaster skin is like, oh, she's like a statuesque Nordic goddess, right? It's all about how you want to do it. That's a great point. Excellent point. I too, but one very myopic and one macro. The wedging of circumstances. One far-sighted eye, one nearsighted eye. But anyway, like spending time inside makes you myopic. So one of the things you can do for kids, and I'm going to try to commit to this year, is like 1,000 hours outside. I'm going to spend like 2 to 3 hours, even though it's hot. It gets hot in here in the summer. We'll find something fun to do outside. Looking off into the distance and not looking here all the time. Like looking at things close up makes you unable to see far away. Looking far away, maybe I'm slightly farsighted because I spent so much time outside in my youth. I was outside like, I don't know, hours and hours a day in my youth. Every single day. I'll probably get skin cancer because of it. Who knows? But spending a lot of time outside looking off in the distance. My father was farsighted too, though, and it was the same thing. He spent all his time outside. Some barrier of entry is good. It's true, but we could talk about that some other time. I think it depends on the type of glasses. There are styles of glasses to match with the shape of the face. There you go. You can also change it, like big, fat Milton Friedman glasses convey a certain thing, whereas like half moon spectacles make you look old. There's different things, you know. Speaking of gammas, is that generally more associated with villains, antagonists? What a great question. Some common villain archetypes that you might see is the gamma male, like not the gamma. I'm going to call him the omega. Like the absolute bottom of the trash heap loser. What does he lust after? He lusts after a woman that he can't get because of his physical deformity, like he's pimply or whatever. He lusts after her in a bad way, not in a like, oh man, she's so beautiful, but like, I want to do nasty things to her, right? That's like the omega. And so the omega will do whatever bad things he can to get to her. So omegas are like Revenge of the Nerds kind of guys. And I make this point about the movie Revenge of the Nerds. The way that you know it was written by gammas is that all the characters are basically gamma omega males. They're omegas and they're the heroes. So Revenge of the Nerds got everything right except who the heroes were. You know, they do awful things. They basically, I think at one point there's like, and people laugh about it. Like he tricks someone into having sex with him. And it's like, that's rape, dude. That's not okay. Or they sneak in and like smell panties or something at one point. It's like, that's really creepy. And it kind of, they start off as a joke and then, but they're the protagonists of the story. We can read outside. You can read outside. Maybe the UV. So when you're myopic, your eyes like grow forward, I guess. Like they elongate. But if you spend a lot of time outside, they're finding that, you know, there's like an epidemic of myopia among developed countries. And they think it's kids are going to school and spending all day inside a schoolroom instead of being outside. And I did make the video on virgins versus chads years ago. You know, Harold Lauder in The Stand. Yeah, he's the omega male. Eating the chocolate payday bars and being pimply and wanting to bang the attractive girl and not being able to. He's lusting after the girl next door in a bad way. He's like the Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill's an omega male. Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. So let's call him the omega male. That's a really common character archetype for a villain. And in fact, a villain, kind of, if we're thinking of what villain really means, it means like peasant, but maybe a more kind of directionally accurate one would be like an omega, right? A villain is a person who is of low status and also bad. So this is maybe classic ideas kind of getting into it, that people of low status were also bad. They weren't just like down on their luck. Like they were actually bad. Weird thing to think about, but you know, maybe it makes sense. It makes sense if you think about it like that. Oh, we're starting to run out of time and I haven't done any live writing. I might do a live write tomorrow. Maybe take a 2-minute break. There's so many more character archetypes to talk about. I could talk about them all day. You guys are thinking of a bunch of them too. The evil omega male. He's lusting after what he can't have. Other kinds of villain archetypes would be, you know, to make a villain, it's really just a person with an excess of vice. You're going to hate that villain. They have wrath. They kick the dog. They have, lust. They have some other thing. They have gluttony. They're fat, right? So the physical traits of villains tend to go along with that. But the main thing that defines a villain is that they're willing to work against the protagonist in a way that is usually, most stories they're going to do evil things to get what they want. Evil things to get what they want. Okay, let me take a short break. I'm going to turn on the fan because it's hot. Turn down the lights a little bit, and then we'll do a quick live. All right, got my soda. There we go. Get the mood down here a bit. Look better. Ba-da-ba-da-bum-bum. Ba-da-ba-da-bum. That's like my signature lick. It's a little pentatonic lick. I do it in all kinds of music. You can find it all over the place. Kind of fun. Bring it down. All right. Anything can be troped if it's done repeatedly. Yeah. Could you repost the Discord link in the members page? It's expired. Yes, I will do that shortly. Absolutely. It's supposed to like integrate automatically, but I can't get the robots to do what they're supposed to do. The robots are not participating. I'm realizing I'm looking just at the YouTube chat. There's never anybody on like Twitter or Twitch. Like I stream on Twitch, but there's never anyone there. So whatever. I'm going to try Restream for a year, see if streaming on every other platform will build audiences on those platforms too. Who knows? Who knows? All right. Let me pull up this document here. Turn that down. Let's close that. Let's open up. I think it's still called I Walk Down the Gallery, which I need to change that opening line. It's just I'm writing in first person. I got roped into doing that, but we'll carry it through. We'll write this book in first person, which is a really, to me, it's weird for fantasy. I just never write in first person for this. I always write like horror stuff or that kind of thing in first person. All right, let's see. Where's our? I have another scene here. Should be correct. Put the chat down there. Okay. I think that's it. All right. Let's hop down here. Did we finish scene 3? Let's find out. Okay, yeah. See, I make little notes like where I left off because I haven't looked at this since I last streamed it. I'm like, what was I doing? All right. See here. He sneaks into the house, finds the boy, has a crisis of conscience, and then stops. He stops. He doesn't kill the boy. How do I want to execute this? Here. Let's do, I'll be on scene 4. Add this great description of the Strandum. Gunwald. For this, let's think. We'll just think for a minute. Hightown. It's like a breath of fresh air after like imagining someone coming up from a river. Coming up. How do you spell rapid? 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 Rapids of a river. means of not being noticed. Some are more mundane. I don't look like an interesting person. And that quality is become like the Stones, or like a beggar, which to a rich man is practically the same thing. Hey, I made it to a stream. What's up? Yeah, I'm streaming on Facebook too. I don't usually I stopped interacting with the like Facebook during the pandemic thing because it was just too demoralizing, is what I'm going to say. It was really demoralizing to see people I considered friends, just like what happened to them, like where they went, the things that they were posting. You know, it's like, you know, I don't want to watch my friends lick boots, but that's metaphorically what they were doing. It's just really sad, you know, very sad. Didn't want to see them. Which to a rich man is practically the same thing. The problem with nice areas is that I'm a nice person. Not in deed, nor in appearance. Which makes my by what's her name? Did I name her Camilla? I thought I named her Camilla. No, I didn't want to do that because that was like Fire Emblem, Chirilla. A rock. It was a dirt. Something to be wiped away. But I had more. Skills are not limited to the blade. like me. I have an affinity for magic. Wear a brown cloak, and I walk quietly. When I wish, I can wear a cloak of illusion and walk out of begging me to go thither. I like words like thither. Ugly strand of elite. Call him barbarous. Is it common to write this fast? I don't know if this is fast or not, bro. This is how fast I write. The streets were still full of dung. And by all perception, I was dung. Turned away from. Looked away from me as I passed beneath the waving afternoon leaves. Letting the dagger guide me wordlessly. I found it. Northern corner of a cobbled street. It faced the ruins of an old battlement. And beyond that, the outer wall of the castle. But it was a tile roof and a line columns. The architecture was in vogue in the South, perhaps half a century. A revival. Let's do it. the architectural scratched charcoal. How do you spell precision? Precision. And the what's the word? The under the curiosity. Real. I like to leave a little mystery when you're writing the first person. He's talking to the audience. So when you're talking to the audience, you can control the flow of information, right? He's revealing that he knows something about like the ancient architecture maybe that was here before. We don't know how he knows. We want to find that out now. Drop the little thing in there, and maybe we'll find out about that later in the story as we go, as we learn more about who this character is. What did I name him? Oh yeah, that's right. Aha, this is fun. Did I name him? I had an idea for this. Let me see if I wrote it down. Yeah, notice that he doesn't have a name yet. Which of your books are you most happy with? I don't know. I like all of them. Just like I like my children. I liked Water of Awakening a lot. It was just really nailed my vision. I was just really able to like execute my vision with that one. Same thing with Muramasa Blood Drinker, those two longer books. And then I went on a long kind of sojourn doing books of different lengths that I have various amounts of happiness with. And generally, even if I feel like a product is not, that's not my favorite thing I've done, I'll usually put it out anyway. And sometimes it's everybody else's favorite, like Voices of the Void or Eyes in the Walls. And people really enjoy those books. So, yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say. The one that people should read is this one, Keys to Prolific Creativity. All right. I looked up the overlapping green leaves of a great oak, nearly hugging the overbuilt house. The green than it once was. Another little Another little hint there, right? Another little hint. No matter my skills, I would tire. I would tire of using magic. No matter my aptitude, is a better word. I'm tired of using magic. And it had its limits. The sun would unmake me, as would the wakeful house. For even then, I could hear the voices of busy work within. The knife knew, and its will was unmistakable. Swiftly, I also knew that I must escape the city, as well as perform my task. Otherwise, I could never exchange the heart of my victim for that of my love. Alright. I decided to explore the ruined wall stood between the court of fine houses. Find some nook to rest until the sun. Found one not too far off. A makeshift cave of a fallen wall. Looked out on the moat, on a wide section of the moat that encircled the castle. A fisherman pushed himself here and there. The flows of magic. Let's use a raft. See, I want to mention that, like, cause I kind of want to have a gross thing here. I don't know why, but it's kind of feel it in my heart. So you wouldn't fish in a moat. Do you guys know why? The answer is because the moat is where the toilets of the castle empty. So all the outer ward toilets would empty into a moat, and the keep toilets would empty into the inner ward, or depending on how the castle was built, also into the moat on the other side. Did what? No. Call him a brown man. Suntanned, but you get the idea. All right. What time is it? 8. All right. About time to kill a stream. Let's see how much we wrote in 20 minutes. We wrote, where's my word count? 752 words. All right. Not bad for 20 minutes. I'm going to do another write stream. I'm going to do another live write at some point this week. One of my hopes with January is to establish and I'll post this, by the way, I'll post these on my Patreon every time I do them, so you can read the story as we go along here. You don't have to like read it on the screen. So I'll post it on my Patreon, patreon.com/DavidVStewart. I'll also post it on the Ko-Fi page. So you can read this story as it's developed here. We have 4,000 words so far, 3,800 words technically. When planning a book, how much time would you give for editing and revisions? I don't think in terms of time. Okay, this is a really good question, and this will probably be the last good question I can answer before we go. So I don't fix time. You can fix whenever you're developing a product, whether it's a book or a game or a piece of software or a widget that you're going to sell, right? But especially something like software. Or a comic, you can fix your time or you can fix your scope, right? Or a movie, right? So you can fix your time or you can fix your scope. So if you fix your time, that means I'm going to do whatever I can in this amount of time. If fixing your scope means I'm going to do this much, and it's going to take however long it takes to get there. So I tend to fix scope. That being said, I don't do it infinitely, right? So after I finish a first draft, before I do editing, I will actually design a cover, come up with a blurb, I'll come up with all my ad materials, and then I'll maybe set up a pre-order, because I know me when it comes to revision, and I will want to revise too many times. So I'll revise as much as I can before that dead date, then I'll release it. And usually I'll catch typos after the fact, or readers will catch them, and then we'll fix the typos. Try to catch every typo, but they don't happen. But the main part of editing is like revising the story, changing things, rewriting, fixing sentences. That's the main part of editing. So I do kind of fix that, and I'll usually, depends on the length of the novel, right? So if it's a short book, maybe I'll give myself a week. If it's a longer book, maybe I give myself 3 weeks. Just depends, right? For most things, I don't fix that. And so in some cases, I maybe won't even generate the materials until I've like edited the book. But usually I like to give myself a fixed timeline. It forces you to actually release your project, because the truth is, books are never finished. They're only abandoned. You may have heard that before. It's really easy to have this in this book, right? It's super easy to fall into a perfectionist mindset where you're terrified of people not liking your book because you didn't rewrite it enough times, or you didn't fix enough things that were wrong with it, or there's a typo or something somewhere, and you got to do that. You got to fix everything, right? It's real easy to fall into that mindset. You have to avoid it, or you're never going to come out with your project. So, I will give myself, so when I'm drafting, I don't fix time. Usually it's really, you can do both. You can fix the scope and the time, but it's really hard. You have to be really on top of it, knowing I'm going to write a book that's exactly 50,000 words, and I'm going to write exactly this many words per day. And you can do it, but so you have to be really experienced to know how to do it. So, and because my schedule is sometimes helter skelter, I try not to do that. But like, I will set myself usually some sort of drop dead date where I have to abandon the book at that point and put it out and see what people think about it. So usually a week to 3 weeks, depending. Sometimes further out. If I know I'm going to be interrupted by other things, or I have to like go on vacation, something like that. I think for Crown of Sight, I had everything ready to go weeks in advance, because I knew I was going to have a baby, but I didn't know when that baby was going to come. Turns out the book was released like, I'll have to look it up. I think it came out 3 days after my daughter was born, which is crazy to think about. But I knew that it was going to be that way. And I also knew it was a book that most people were not going to read, so I didn't really care about. I just had to put out a book then. So anyway, yeah. So it just depends. The longer the book, the more time you're going to need. Shorter book, I'll give myself a couple days a week to make sure that I have time to read it. Something like, Demon Ex Machina, which I came out with last year. The editing process was 1 day. And that's because the better you plan, the less there is to do with editing. Okay? The better you plan the book, the less there is to do with editing. So if the book is really well planned, I actually won't have to, it's the amount of time it takes to read through the book a couple times is the amount of editing that you really need to do. So if it's a book that takes 3 hours to read, you need 6 hours to edit. If you're just like fixing little things here or there. If it's a long novel that takes 20 hours to read, you need 40 hours to edit. So however long it takes you to get to 40 hours. So however long you think it would take the book to be read, you need to at least double that time for editing, because you're going to stop, rewrite sentences and stuff like that. That's like regular editing. If you're having to rewrite big portions of the story, fix story editing things, maybe triple that time. So the time it takes to read, double it. A 2-hour book like Voices of the Void, I could edit it in 4 hours. That's 2 nights of work for me, right? Something that needs to be rewritten a lot, maybe I need, for even that 2-hour book, and maybe I need 6 or 8 hours to edit it, but probably not as much. Anyway, thanks so much, guys. See you all next time. You can read this on the Patreon, or is it Ko-Fi or Ko-Fi? Ko-Fi. The Ko-Fi page. And I will see you all next time. Have a great, great day. Let's listen to some music. What music do I have here? Let's listen to something we haven't heard about. Oh, yeah, there's a big 2-hour mix. There's a 2-hour mix I put up on the channel of all the live stuff from last year. And if you haven't subscribed to the No Talkie channel, you should totally subscribe to the No Talkie channel. Here we go. It seems these last sections lend like a well-paced backdrop for a tranquil change of pace, assuming these are essential for contrast used for setups. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of action in the next couple scenes, right? So here's what this No Talking page looks like. Where am I? Where's my software? Boom. Hey, my music is not AI. That's me performing it live. I'm writing the book live. I do the music live. This is how you fight the robots, is you do it all live, baby. All right. Take it easy, folks. I'll see you all next time. Here it is.